So CNET is the Social Solidarity Economy English Speaking Network, abbreviated to CNET. And this is the third time we put on this specific workshop, which is what is the social solidarity economy. And we're generously funded by the Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois de l'expression anglaise. And part of the reason we host this series is because the Anglophones of Quebec tend to have a little less knowledge and understanding of what the social solidarity economy is. So we're trying to make that as accessible as possible. So my name's Olivia. I'll be the facilitator for today's workshops. I'm one of the social economy officers at the Regional Development Network, which is the fiduciary body of CNET, as well as I'm the general coordinator of SEAS, which is a solidarity economy incubator coming out of Concordia University. I've been working in and around the social solidarity economy for the last 6 years, and I'm excited to give you all a little insight into that world today. So the way this will be structured is we'll go over what it is, so some definitions, then the key values that hold the movement together, and then as well as the emergence of the movement and a little bit of history around that. Then we'll talk about Quebec and shed a little spotlight on why Quebec is an exceptional place for the social solidarity economy. And then also a couple ways of how to get more involved. Also, at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to just unmute yourself. If you read it in the chat, I may not see it right away. So I encourage you just to jump in. So we're going to start with 2 little polls, just to help me gauge how much I should be describing things. So the first one should be on your screen now. It's what is your knowledge level? So how familiar are you with the social solidarity economy? Very knowledgeable would be like an expert. Unfamiliars would be, this is the first time you're really hearing about it. All right, thank you for doing that. So looks like you guys are in the right place here. So I'll try to keep the language as layman as possible. And if I'm saying anything that's too, because there's a lot of terminology involved. So if I'm saying anything that you don't really know the definition of, feel free to just interrupt me and ask questions. The other quiz here is, why are you here? So, you know, maybe you're just curious and you're kind of on the fence about it. Maybe you just want to learn more. Maybe you have a project idea that you're developing, or maybe you're currently already doing something. Those are kind of the 3 ones. And if there's any other responses that I didn't cover there, feel free to just jump in. All right. Okay, cool. So yeah, it looks like someone's already working on it. Some people are looking at it and interested. So yeah, I think over the course of this workshop, you might realize that you may have been involved or are currently working on things that are already a part of the social solidarity economy, but you just haven't been using that language. So yeah, we'll see. Thank you for participating in that. So this is the New Economy Coalition's definition. New Economy Coalition is out of New York. They're a great organization, and their definition is that the SSE is a global movement to build a just and sustainable economy where we prioritize people and the planet over endless profits and growth. So growing out of the social movements of Latin America and the global South, the solidarity economy provides real alternatives to capitalism, where communities can govern themselves through participatory democracy, cooperatives, public ownership, and a culture of solidarity and respect for the earth. So I think we only have the first part of the definition there, but the rest of it will become clear over time as well. So a social enterprise is an organization with a social purpose that provides a good or service as a revenue generating activity. And those surpluses that are generated through the revenues are reinvested back into the organization or the community. So social enterprises are made up of groups of people voluntarily organizing their economic activities, specifically to meet needs within their community. So it's upheld with the primacy of people over capital, and is based on principles of participation, empowerment, and individual and collective responsibility. So those may have sounded like a lot of buzzwords here. And when we actually look at what it is, what sectors does it occupy, we will find out that it actually occupies all of them, right? So land and food is very popular. So since sovereignty and decision-making over land and food is core to the functioning society, the agricultural sector has long been at the heart of the movement. So for example, there's a rich history in the rural southern United States of Black landowners creating producer cooperatives and uniting to confront the fluctuating market prices to secure a livable wage collaboratively instead of undercutting each other for prices. So this was known as the Colored Farmers National Alliance and cooperative unions, which at its peak had over 1 million members. There's also a lot of producer co-ops in Quebec. So housing is another big one. So housing is safety and it's preventative healthcare and often regarded as a human right. So by taking land and housing off of the speculative real estate market, which is one of the main drivers of gentrification and displacement, and putting it into the hands of the community, often through either land trusts or cooperative ownership, the solidarity economy aims to make sure people have access to affordable housing. So in Montreal, we have Milton Park, which is a community land trust and a network of 17 housing cooperatives that spans over, I think it's a 3 by 8 block radius, around 300 units. And this provides affordable housing for an otherwise gentrified neighborhood in Montreal. So money and finance, we'll see. So transforming our financial systems is key to transforming our economies. So our current economic system is, well, the financing piece is actually what's called a debt-based system, which in practice allows people who have money to make more money and people who don't have money to pay for lacking money. So if you have a savings account, then you're able to accumulate interest on that versus when you don't have money and you withdraw from your checkings account, you get slapped with overdraft fees. So that's kind of what a debt-based monetary system looks like. And this aggravates and perpetuates income inequality. So divesting from private banks and reinvesting in credit unions and other community-controlled capital, we can create financial systems that uphold human-centered economic practices. So in Quebec, we have Desjardins. And so Desjardins is a little bit of a monopoly. So in BC, there's around, I think, 150 different credit unions. And usually there's a lot of smaller unions, like credit unions. But in Quebec, we have Desjardins, which is somewhat of a monopoly, but nonetheless, they have the Caisse de l'Économie Solidaire, which takes the savings of its members and reinvests a couple million each year into different social solidarity economy projects. And that's also a big reason why Quebec has such a thriving system. So energy and utilities, we'll talk a little bit about later. Arts and media, so nonprofit. Yeah, I guess we'll go into this a little bit, but yeah, so cultural workers are often underpaid and undervalued. And our current media landscape is also concentrated in the hands of 5 big companies. So 4 privately owned and 1 government owned, the government owned one being CBC. And the term for independent media is any type of media that's free from government influence. private companies. So journalists have the right for freedom of expression. And when the media is not independent, this right is violated. So if you agree that journalists should have the capacity to say or do anything you want, or they want, then without independent media, this wouldn't really be possible, as it pushes the boundaries. And for example, reports on what the governments are doing or things like that. Yeah, and we'll also touch a little bit on technology later too. So I gave a couple of examples in there, but practically what we're talking about here is nonprofits, and there's 5 different types of cooperatives. I think there's 4 pictured here, but there's workers cooperatives, there's producer cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, solidarity cooperatives. And then there's also a thing called it's a coopérative de travail l'actionnaire, which is a shareholding company that allows workers of a company to buy shares of it through a cooperative shareholding company. As well as things that we're talking about would be things like more like grassroots organizations, so collectives, unions, or associations, or these kinds of things. And the uniting theme of what qualifies these organizations as a part of the social solidarity economy is them having democratic processes built into a collective ownership model. And so that's how we qualify these things. So this is a little diagram that I always like to bring up because it shows the full cycle of the economy. You might have heard of the circular economy. This is kind of based off of that. So yeah, it's nice because it highlights the creation, production, exchange, consumption, and then surplus allocation or waste. Right. So you'll see here at the top. Oops. Oh no. My apologies. You'll see here at the top. So, cultural creation, the arts, the commons, land trusts, production of food. Then we have things that are self-employment, nonprofit collectives, workers cooperatives, DIY. So when you're actually making things. Then when you're exchanging, you could be talking about, sliding scale pricing, community currencies, solidarity markets, fair trade, these kinds of things. Consumption, you could be, self-provisioning, living in a housing co-op, purchasing ethically, and then surplus allocation, recycling, composting, community finance, credit unions, these kinds of things. So it's very broad, but it's a pretty one. So that's why it's on here. This might be a little bit more practical of an explanation. So this is called the diverse economy map, which is created by Gibson Gran. And so on the top column here, you can see there is the typical, what you would say like capitalist market activities, capitalist market. And then in the middle, you would say alternative market activities. And on the bottom, we would say these are outside of the realms of capitalist markets. So, and then on the top, you see the 5 key areas. So labor, enterprise, transactions, property, finance. So in this exercise, which maybe actually I'll demonstrate and then we can talk about it a little bit. So for example, I do neighborhood work. I do some gardening in my community garden. I also have I work at a cooperative, and I also do have some paid labor. So I'm an employee of RDN. As far as the enterprise goes, that's a nonprofit. And yeah, so I work in a nonprofit. I don't work in a And I also participate in social enterprises. Transactions go, I do use Canadian currency primarily. I do also participate in some foraging and some gardening and household sharing as well. And I do have a CSA basket, so community supported agriculture. As far as property goes, I do rent from a landlord, so I'm a tenant of private property. And I do also enjoy, atmosphere and and all of the common open access things needed to survive. And then as far as finance goes, I have a credit union, and I'm part of Desjardins, and that's where I primarily do my transactions from. So it's an interesting way. Yeah. So does anyone want to jump in before I and say some things that they're a part of in the diverse economy? No, you're all shy. All right, that's okay. Well, so the purpose of this exercise isn't just to categorize our lives, but it's to bring a new non-hierarchical perspective to the diversity of activities that we engage in that all contribute to the economy. Right. So instead of the idea that you only contribute to the economy in one way, and that the traditional kind of capitalist way is the dominant way and the only way to really organize our lives, through this mapping process, we can see that we're all actually already contributing to the diverse economy. And it allows us to focus on how to strengthen our community economies to ensure that we're all surviving well within it. So this is another example from Gibson's Grams. This is called the iceberg model. So typically what we consider to be the economy is just the tip of the iceberg, right? So we're thinking you get your job, you buy food from the grocery store, and then from the IGA. Well, some IGAs are cooperatives actually, so maybe that's not the best example. But traditional commodity markets, you buy things from Amazon, you get your paycheck, that's it. In practice, the economy is actually much deeper, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So there's lots of different ways to participate in it, as we've kind of gone over. So there are 5 connecting values for anything within the social solidarity economy. The first one of that is pluralism. So pluralism is a political philosophy holding that people of different beliefs and backgrounds and lifestyles can all coexist in the same society and participate equally in the political process. So pluralism assumes that its practice will lead to good decision makers to negotiate solutions that contribute to the common good. So there's no one size fits all approach, but like any healthy ecosystem, the solidarity economy flourishes with a full spectrum of interconnected practices and perspectives. One of the other connecting themes is equity. So in the context of SSE, or say SSE, I mean social solidarity economy. This is equity is the concept of economic fairness. So the distribution of resources and surplus throughout society should be such that everyone can enjoy a reasonable quality of life. So equity in our current context is often achieved through things like a progressive tax rates, whereby high income people pay more and low income people will pay proportionately less of their income, right? For SSE organizations, for practicing organizations, equity can look like creating solidarity funds to support workers in times of crisis, or it can have training programs for people to gain upward mobility within organizations, or other things like writing letters of support for other movements and these kinds of things. So solidarity, obviously one of the values of the solidarity economy, is really kind of shorthand for a range of social interactions, right? So we're talking about like cooperation, mutualism, reciprocity, altruism, gifting, sharing, these kinds of things, right? So a social solidarity economy seeks to nurture these values as opposed to things that we're often fall into, such as individualization, competitiveness, divisiveness, which manifests often as like racism, sexism, classism, which are all defining features of the current capitalist economic system. So practices that express the principle of solidarity can encompass things like organizations sharing physical resources like a tool library or sharing their knowledge on things like funding opportunities. It can also look like, yeah, it said writing letters, but like, if you have a surplus, you donate, if your organization makes a profit, then you donate those profits back to the community, invest in invest it back into your community, right? And solidarity is essential for creating social change. It's what brings us together and ties us for the vision of ties our collective efforts together to enable us to achieve things that individually we couldn't, right? So as a species, we've been able to thrive through our ability to cooperate. And so the social solidarity economy tries to bring this intentionally back to our ways of thinking and organizing. So another big one is sustainability. So this kind of manifests as the concept of bon vivre. Bon vivre is an Andean indigenous perspective of living in harmony with nature and each other. So it's based on the belief of the good life, which is only possible as being a part of a community. So the good of community is placed above that of the individual. And in this concept, community is expanded to include things like nature, plants, animals, the earth itself. And so therefore nature must be respected and cared for as a valuable part of the community. So under this lens also, land cannot be owned by individuals because it is owned by the community and it should be honored and protected in that way. So some movements that have manifested from this concept is the rights of Mother Earth, which has actually been incorporated into the Ecuadorian Constitution in 2008 and the Bolivian Constitution, as well as been now recognized by more than 36 communities in the United States. So I think these are municipalities that have voted for enshrining the rights of Mother Earth into their bylaws, right? So this can be like protecting lakes or things like that. So within our current mode of production, there isn't really a lot of time for true sustainability. So the marketplace tries to commodify it and sell it back to us. So what this looks like is after a 40-hour work week, there isn't enough time to grow your food or preserve your food or these kinds of things. So which is why the concept of fast food and microwave dinners has become so popular, because we're working so much that in order to enjoy that again, we have to buy it. One of the bigger ones, as far as the values go, is participatory democracy. So participatory democracy is a way for people to have an active engagement and participate in their own collective development, right? So participation cannot be coerced or forced. It's optional and motivated by the desire to contribute to the common good. Voluntary participation in the decision-making structures of organizations is key to any type of social solidarity economy enterprise. And participatory democracy enables action to take place as locally as possible. So effectively what that means is people who are affected by a decision should have a say in that decision, which is pretty common sense, but not usually the way things go. So it's also the foundation of self-management, collective ownership, sovereignty, and it creates the conditions for both individual and collective and organizational empowerment, right? So when the values of participatory democracy are eroded within organizations or even countries, we can see then that management often falls susceptible to the whims of market forces. So a tragic example of this would be the Mountain Equipment Co-op, which is formerly a user member cooperative, but over the years, around 10 years, I believe the whole crumbling took, but there was a disengaged membership base and a disempowered board of directors. And then over time, they replaced people on the board of directors who, and I say the kind of the corporate management. So they slowly replaced people on their board with people who aligned with their vision to then not force, but declare bankruptcy in order to allow it to sell its assets back to the corporation. So it's still known as MEC, but the C is now corporation instead of cooperative. So yeah, it's a sneaky thing that the lawyers did because declaring bankruptcy, because in SSE, all the capital assets are actually owned collectively and therefore cannot be privately accumulated unless they declare bankruptcy. So in the social solidarity economy, all 5 of these values must be upheld to the best of their ability. One second, actually. Sorry. So it's this value-based foundation that unites the local practices with the global movement, right? So for example, if you could have a workers cooperative that is a mechanic shop. But if the people who work there are sexist, then we wouldn't really consider them a part of the social solidarity economy, even if they are a workers cooperative. And often I think workers cooperatives are the types of enterprises that are most easily are the kinds that don't really fall under the social solidarity economy, surprisingly, because workers cooperatives can operate the same as any other business. They're similarly structured to like what you would say a partnership is, which is a regular kind of corporate structure. But it's these kind of boundaries that help us keep sight of our connection to the broader movement, right? So the social solidarity economy arose in the 19th century under the context of mutual aid and self-organizing to meet pressing social needs. So the movement became popularized in the 1930s, specifically in the agricultural sector and later in numerous industrial sectors. But in the last 4 decades, there's been an explosion of solidarity-based economic practices due to its ability to address the root cause of many of our economic problems. So often there's symptoms, right? Like low wages or poverty, these kinds of, so those are symptoms of our economic system. And often the SSE is able to address the root of it instead of, so addressing a symptom would be, starting a food bank, right? But then if to address, because then you're addressing food insecurity, whereas addressing the root cause would be starting a users cooperative grocery store. So providing cheap food in an area where it's not available. So as a just example. But yeah, so because the social solidarity economy includes a wide range of practices that spans from economic, social, environmental, political, the grassroots solidarity-based economic activities have really emerged all over the world, which have also been rediscovering timeless practices and cultural traits and renewing them and adapting them to our current context. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. So The term solidarity economy was actually first coined by Philippe Alaz as early as 1937, but became popularized in Latin America in the 1980s as SSE. Right. So the reason is believed that it became that it emerged from Latin America is because of the intense international development that was happening at the time there. So the International Monetary Fund in the 70s was really pushing industrialization for a lot of these communities, which created a combination of rough imperialist colonial conditions, which resulted eventually in the debt crisis for countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico, which were unable to repay their debts. So after they'd taken huge loans from the International Monetary Fund to create these factories or whatever, these lots of different types of sectors, they weren't able to pay back their debts, which led to a depreciation of their currencies. And then subsequently the industries which they had developed, which were dependent on exporting goods, were no longer feasible because their money had, like their currency had depreciated. So this created increasingly harsh working conditions, mass layoffs, factories shutting down, and people were frustrated. So this led to people actually occupying their workplaces to take back the means of production. Right. So within Argentina alone, workers were pushed into these extreme situations, which prompted over 200 capitalist businesses. When I say capitalist, I mean these are multinational corporate kind of businesses that ended up being seized in the early 2000s. So there's a long, rich history you can dive into about all these stories of resistance and rebuilding. There's one that's notable called Zanon, and they have a little documentary, which I think I'll show you a quick clip of. I think we have time. Let's see here. Can you guys see it? Yeah. So that was just a quick clip there. And you can watch the whole thing online. Oh my, okay. Close that. Sorry. So what ended up happening there, I'll just give you a quick summary, was so after, because of the debt crisis and all those things, the employees of Xenon were having their wages withheld because there was cash flow issues. And there's one quote that's, you know, we didn't live to work, we worked to live, because it was, people didn't have enough money. So they ended up going on strike for around a year, which ultimately led to the company declaring bankruptcy. And then the employees have been in control of it ever since. So since it's now owned by the employees, it's considered actually a pillar of the community. So it's a very small community in Argentina, but the factory is the heart of the community. So They have, festivals and things like that that are all, yeah, you saw like there's kids walking through the factory, right? So it's very family focused in these kinds of things. Yes, but there's a lot of interesting case studies. And yeah, we'll jump back into, actually, yeah, so here we are. So the economy is a social construct, if you understand what I mean by that. So it's shaped by the dynamics of culture, politics, history, technology, and even our natural environment. So all over the world, social solidarity economy practices have emerged connected by the values of local social movements and local conditions, right? So advocacy for transformation encompasses economic, social, and political systems, which are all intertwined. So as a movement, the solidarity economy is interwoven with social movements. So feminism, anti-racism, labor rights, these kinds of things. So under this context, we can see social movement activists, and we'd call them social economy practitioners or collective entrepreneurs, or these kinds of folks, are actually on two sides of the same coin, right? So activists, and one is advocating to oppose these things, right? And the other is proposing, right? So, so opposing and resisting is often reactionary and framed as like organizing in opposition to something, right? Whereas in the social solidarity economy, what we're doing is we're proposing and we're building. So we're talking about enacting the transformation. So yeah, so both sides of the coin are necessary and interdependent to push through, supportive policies and which create meaningful gains for the working class. And yeah, this slide maybe shouldn't have been here. This is another way to look at it, which shows, so in the solidarity economy, what we're doing is often we're building things, right? We're building nonprofits, we're building cooperatives, we're building social enterprises to meet community needs. Whereas we still also need to see resistance, right? So there's activists, so organizing in social movements, people who work in electoral politics, and all of this is tied together through culture and interpersonal relationships. So jumping back into Quebec, so over for the last 100 years, the social economy has influenced the development of Quebec in a variety of forms, structures, organizations, through generations of development for a more kind of human-centered society and economy. This really started with, or I would say it's maybe not started, but really became accelerated during the Quiet Revolution, which was a period of intense socio-political, socio-cultural change in Quebec. And that started after the election of 1960, when the Liberals took power after a long reign from the Conservative Party. So the Quiet Revolution was marked as the beginning of the economic reforms which took place in Quebec, and which really planted the seeds for the cooperative movement to flourish to where it is today. So this took shape of numerous mega projects such as Hydro-Quebec and the hospital networks we have. And yeah, so notably, it was the value alignment between the social democratic and separatist movements and the social solidarity economy, which assisted it gaining popularity. So values such as like sovereignty, autonomy, self-management became somewhat mainstream in Quebec because of the separatist movement. So during the 1987 Meech Lake Constitutional Accord recognized Quebec as a distinct society. and transferred a bunch of new powers to the province of Quebec. So that's an example of Quebec wanting to maintain its sovereignty, and just the attitudes and cultural reflections of Quebec. And then in 1995, I'm sure most of you will remember this, which is the referendum to separate from Canada. And Quebec voters lost by quite a narrow margin to remain in the Federation of Canada. The following year, the working group was founded, le Groupe de Travail sur l'économie sociale, which was formed during a summit conference on the economy and employment. The working group had 6 months to assess the potential support in every region of Quebec for developing their own social solidarity economy government body, like the Chantier is its own kind of federation. And they got a very good response. And then they continued their works for another 2 years, until which time the Chantier was formed in 1999. At the end of this period, they had accomplished a lot. And so then they determined that the best thing to do would be to consolidate all the ongoing efforts within Quebec to found the Chantier de l'économie sociale as a nonprofit society, which now distributes quite a lot of money, and also does a lot of research, and they're kind of the so there's only 3 bodies within North America that operate on the same level as the Chantier. One of those is for the United States, one of them is for the rest of Canada, and then Quebec has its own. So that gives you a little insight as to how the support ecosystem for the social solidarity economy within Quebec is operating on a different level than the rest of North America. So as a result, today, we'll see that Quebec is a global leader of the cooperative movement with 11,200 cooperative enterprises. When we include nonprofits in there, we're looking more at around like 20,000 additional enterprises. And in the last decade, the SSC has really gone from the margins to the mainstream. So now in Quebec, there's 220,000 workers, and just in cooperatives, and 13 million members in cooperatives, right? So very substantial. And yeah, so also if you look at the full, so with a 47 billion annual turnover within Quebec. When we look at the cooperative movement as a whole across all of the world, it's $2 trillion of goods and services turned over, which is more than the GDP of Canada. So just highlighting that this movement has been, used to be more marginal, but is now becoming quite mainstream, and is actually growing at a faster pace than the rest of the world's economy. So I believe I was at the World Summit a couple of months ago, and they said the cooperative economy is growing at 7%, whereas the rest of the economy is growing at like 4.5 or something. So it's growing faster than the rest of the economy. So some examples as to what we're talking about when I'm saying cooperatives. Just wanted to highlight a few examples from here in Quebec. So we have BRIA, which is a home support cooperative, which aims to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of its customers. So for some, this will allow them to continue to live at home for as long as possible with respect and dignity. For others, it's freeing them from household chores, which have become a burden. So BRIA is they provide home services. They're a workers cooperative based out of Quebec City. Then we have Le Recyclo-Centre de Montreuil-Est, which is a recycling and recovery center for electronic devices. So they're able to process 23 tons of electronic waste annually, which is sorted, crushed, and then recycled. Additionally, they're partnered with the local employment center, which offers placements and skill training programs for people in the region. So here I'm based out of Montreal. We actually don't have an electronic recycling program. So I wanted to highlight that one as well. Another one is Cooperative de Alental from Sherbrooke, which is actually one of the largest distributors of natural and organic products in all of Canada and the largest in Quebec. So its mission is to distribute, transform, and promote natural and organic products while respecting its employees, suppliers, and the environment. So for 40 years, it's improved accessibility of buying local and natural products through offering discounts to its members. So some of the other cooperatives I've worked with source their like vegetables from Coop Alental because you can get organic, it's better price, these kinds of things. Then we have the Regional Electricity Cooperative of Saint Jean Baptiste, which was founded actually in 1944, which is quite impressive. And they promote rural electrification through their electricity cooperative. So in addition to providing electricity to their members, they also connect their members to things like electric car subsidies. And they also publish like a monthly newsletter with other promotional offers and these kinds of things. So it's just a couple of examples of how collective entrepreneurship and self-management can not only create like meaningful job opportunities, but also services that otherwise the market wouldn't deem feasible, right? So for example, the regional electricity, sometime, I mean, back in the 40s, it wasn't feasible by the market to provide electricity to these regions. So they created their own co-op. Right? So these are the kinds of things that that social enterprises can do because it's focused on meeting community needs first. Right? So if you want to find out more social enterprises in your region, you can actually check out Le Chantier's website. They have a research directory that filters by region. So it's not a full comprehensive list because I've noticed a couple of them are missing, but it's still worth checking out if you're interested in learning more what's available in your region. So that concludes our presentation today. So CNET, we're again the Social Solidarity Economy English Speaking Network, which is a subsidiary program of the Regional Development Network. And we are fairly a new organization. And what we do is we offer ongoing project incubation support. So through the ideation process to help you determine what structure is best, and then help support you in getting some financing, business plan writing, and these kinds of things, and also connecting you to other resources that are available. We also have a internship mentorship program. So this is called our SEMI program. So if you have a project that you would like to have an intern work on, you can apply as in the project stream, or if you're just someone who wants to gain experience working on a project, you can apply for the placement stream. And then you're matched with a mentor and you're matched with a placement based off of what you want to learn and what you're interested in. We're also, we've created a financing resource database with, I believe there's 140 something different like wage subsidies, grants, and these kinds of things for social enterprises. So if you want access to funding, come talk to us, and other training and educational things such as this. So you can, my email's at the bottom there, and my colleague Hoffman, also the other social economy officer. And that concludes our session for today. Any questions or comments?
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I didn't skim too much or that it wasn't too out there. Because we tried to make it from like the bigger perspective and then narrow it down into practical examples to see,
Olivia, I really liked it. It was a nice overview. Usually they talk about social economy, and you talk about social solidarity economy. It's the same, right?
So I think it's actually not on this presentation, but so the social economy is a part of the social solidarity economy. So for example, if you're looking here, typically you wouldn't consider things that are involved in like electoral politics, or you wouldn't consider social movement organizing. You wouldn't consider those things as a part of the social economy. That's why we include the solidarity economy, because it's connected to the broader movement. So the social economy could be, for example, the workers' cooperative that's a little, the mechanic shop that's sexist, that, you know, they're doing a workers' cooperative, yes, but they're not practicing the solidarity.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you for this clarification. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming today. And if you have any ideas or comments, feel free to also email me.